Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Our bi-weekly COVID-19 update webinar will begin in a few moments. Before we begin, I will make a few notes on the webinar platform if you are new. So the webinar panel is a blue or orange flower icon, which you can find on your screen. And when you click this open, you'll see a handouts pane where you can download today's presentation. On this pane, there's also a questions section where you can type your questions for our panelists today. We try our best to answer as many questions as we can, either through the chat box direct to you or during our live Q&A session towards the end. Following our webinar, please take a few moments to complete a short survey, letting us know your experience for today. You'll also receive a recording of today's session by email. And with that, I am now happy to introduce Laura Jones, our Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Alexa. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you are joining us from. I'm really excited about today's webinar. I'm always excited about these webinars, but today's webinar, we have with us, in addition to having Corinne with us, who is Corinne and I regularly co-host these with Brendan and Rachel, but in addition, we have some really special guests today from across Canada, from our provincial lobbying team. So in addition to the national lobbying that we do, that we've been talking about on these calls, we're also very, very active at the provincial level. And so I'm joined by 4 great colleagues today representing the West, Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada to run you through some of the restrictions. And unfortunately, this is good timing because lots of new restrictions have just come in across Canada, and also to run you through an overview of some of the programs. Now, we're covering a lot of geography in this webinar, and if this goes well, we may do some more provincial deep dives if that makes sense, and there's an appetite for that, but we at least wanted to cover off those provincial programs and make sure that you know what's available. It means the handout that Alexa talks about is really important, the handout on the side, because that's where you're going to find details. And our colleagues won't run through every single detail on the slide, but please know that you can also call our helpline, and we do have counselors that know more about those programs who can help you. So that's going to be the focus of the webinar today. But as usual, we'll run you through a few of the things that are new at across Canada, that affect us across Canada. So Corinne will do that in just a moment. But before we get to that, Alexa, I'm going to cover the slide that has been consistent and with us on every webinar. And this is for you folks who may be new to the webinars. We are regularly updating our website, so please check back to the website if you have questions. We do use the questions we get on the webinars and through our helpline to keep that website updated. And then, of course, our counselors are always happy to help, and their numbers are, the number is there on the screen, and I will put that on the screen again at the end. And of course, you can download the handout from the side of the presentation as well. And with that, we'll go to the way we like to start, which is with a few quotes. And difficult times, I think leaning on wisdom and humor from others makes sense. And so hopefully our choices these days are reflecting our hopes and not our fears. I think that's a very nice one. Thinking about something good in every day, even if the overall day isn't good. And people say nothing is impossible, but I do nothing every day. It was just Corinne, that one made Corinne and I laugh out loud, so we decided we'd add that to the list today. And if we go to our next slide, we're getting into the key topics. So we've been doing these. We're going to cover very briefly what's new, get into the provincial rules, as I just said, and then answer as many of your questions as we can. So we've been doing these more topic-focused webinars for a few we're not going weekly anymore. We're going sort of sometimes every other week, depending on what's happening. But I know we covered the HR issues related to COVID, and I heard that was a great webinar. I'm sorry I had to miss that one. And then the HAZCAP webinar also. So if there are topics that you'd like to see, please let us know. And with that, I think I'm introducing Corinne.
Hello. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. And it's Obviously, great and exciting day for us, as Laura mentioned. Happy to have all our colleagues, a few of our colleagues on board today. Part of that is because there hasn't been as much going on federally, and so we wanted to sort of share with you the few things. Some of it is a bit repetitive, but I think they're still relatively recent that we wanted to make sure people were aware of those things. Of course, the biggest issue that's facing all of us right now is the third wave that's bringing new restrictions right across Canada. My colleagues will get into what those restrictions look like in various parts of Canada, but I will say I've already had a question here, just to pull it up again, from Emily, who is sharing her frustration, being tired of everything that's been going on here in Ontario in particular, but I suspect there may be some across the country that are also worried about these continuing restrictions and the feeling that there's a lot of deliberate hurt to small businesses as a result of these. And so definitely these are questions we're going to talk about today and see if we can find some answers. We've been a very outspoken critic of some of these particular approaches, especially here in Ontario, and our colleague Ryan Mallow will get into a bit of that when he comes up, as he's our director for Ontario. So Emily, please know that I suspect many other members on this call are feeling equally frustrated with the ongoing ups and downs about restrictions, but that is the big issues right now, and we're going to get into that in a lot more detail. On the other side, vaccine rollouts do continue. Again, another sort of frustrating area, I know for some, but they are starting to speed up. So there is some hope, hopefully at the end of the tunnel, that we can see those vaccines start to become even more prevalent in the coming weeks. On the program side, however, the deadline to apply for the Canada Emergency Business Account Loan was extended. So we did talk about this a couple of weeks ago, but just wanted to make sure for those of you that may not know this, that's both for the CEBA loan itself, the original, as well as the expansion loan of the extra $20,000. Those application deadline has been extended to June 30th. It was at the end of March, and thankfully the government has extended it. We speak regularly with the Export Development Canada that administers that program through the banks. And they say they still continue to get applications in the thousands. So definitely if it's one that you have not yet used and you are looking at another lockdown or restrictions, it is something that's still available for you to use. A couple of smaller programs, though, we wanted to make you aware of. There's something called the Black Entrepreneurship Loan Fund that was announced actually, I think it was last summer or early fall. Finally, it's going to be opening up in May of 2021, which will provide some loans up to $250,000 Black business owners across Canada. And so when that is officially up and running, we'll let you know, but we now have a date sometime in May. And then the mandatory isolation support for temporary foreign worker program expires on April 21st. So that's for those of you who may have brought in temporary foreign workers. This is primarily in the agricultural industry, but there may be some others as well. Of course, temporary foreign workers at this point are required to isolate upon entry, and that's cost is to be borne by the employer. However, there was a bit of support provided by the government, the federal government, to help with those costs associated with that mandatory isolation. So that does expire soon. It's been in place since January. Finally, the federal budget is coming April 19th. And as Laura mentioned, that will be our next webinar in a couple of weeks. We'll be focused on, it'll of course be just after the budget. So we're going to focus on that particular webinar in regards to what came out of the budget and what that might mean for you as a business owner in Canada.
That's right, Corinne, and one of our partners, our savings partners, who you work very closely with, PayWorks, who we get really good reviews from our members on them, is helping to sponsor that, getting that federal budget special edition of the webinar on for us. So I thought I'd just give them a little plug.
Yeah. So the next slide, I think, is something, Laura, you've been working on.
So, and this comes from a recommendation from one of our webinar participants. So shout out again to the great collaboration we've got going on with all of you who are regulars on our webinars. We got a question what else, on a recent webinar saying, how else can we support in terms of getting that message to the finance minister on the rent relief, particularly for those businesses that don't have those that have those non-arm's length relationships. So you may own your building and be in an operating company and or sorry, in a holding company, and have your operating company rent from the holding company. So we have a new petition on that, thanks to your suggestion. And so in addition to our telling your stories, you can tell your stories directly. We're going to collect these and get these to the finance minister. And the link is live, and a little shout out to my colleague Keely, who's really helped with this. And you can see the petition just has a little bit of a quick checklist, like why can't you access rent relief? But what we really need you to do is put a little bit of your story, how it affects your business. And we'll be collecting these and making sure that they get into the finance minister. So thank you for the suggestion to make sure that we've got an avenue for you. And of course, we've got petitions for Ontario and other different things that are going on. This is one of many, but this is our newest one on rent relief. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that was there. And I think
and I will just say quickly that we don't expect much more to come out from the federal government until the budget, which is a little over a week away now. So hopefully, and just so you know, we've been very active over the last 4 to 6 weeks, meeting with as many politicians as we can to try to influence that budget. So we're very hopeful that maybe we'll see some of these fixes in that budget. So stay tuned on that front.
Yeah, Corinne, you're being modest because I know you've been doing tons of meetings with that pre-budget submission you put together, and you've been in front of a number of standing committees, getting the member. If you ever wonder what do we do with all those surveys that we collect, we really do use them. And Corinne, you pulled this cartoon, which also makes us laugh.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, some of the terms that we never thought about using prior to the pandemic that have now become sort of part of our lexicon. And this, I just thought this was funny, like the word asymptomatic. We all sort of know what that means now, but this just made me chuckle and hopefully makes some of you chuckle as well before we jump into it.
You're too polite to say it, but I was wondering which cabinet minister you had in mind when you were pulling this together.
No, I played the fifth on that one.
Yeah, I know. We're too polite to say that, but I will say that sometimes our never give up, never go away attitude comes in handy when we're dealing with some on the government side. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to get into the provincial programs. And so, yeah, big chart, but here we go, West and Ontario. Just a quick run through on, we'll start with the business restrictions because there's a lot of new stuff there. And then we will go through the programs. So take it away. I think, Keely, why don't we go west to east? So we'll start with the west, and then we'll bring up Ontario and Quebec, and then Marley is with us from Atlantic Canada. So these, just by way of introduction to the audience, some of the great team we have across Canada. Keely, who's based in Calgary, Ryan's in Toronto, and I'm surprised, I know you haven't had your hair cut in a long time, Ryan, because of the restriction, but I'm still surprised you have any left because I know how frustrated you are. We talk regularly where I feel like you're pulling your hair out. Francois in Quebec is our VP for Quebec and is doing a fabulous job for our Quebec members. And Marley's based in Atlantic, and Marley's one of our newer additions to our team and also doing a terrific job. So Keely, I'm going to turn it over to you first, and then we'll kind of run through the restrictions and run through the programs after we do the restrictions.
Awesome, thanks so much, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, we'll start in the west and work our way east. And you will see right at the top, we start with the large events. So essentially really not permitted still across the board. There is some variation in terms of, how many people you can have in your household, but when it comes to those large events, they're really not happening. So this means any businesses in the event industry, trade shows, weddings, etc., are still not able to run their business. Moving on to travel restrictions in the West, really, there's no rules around it, but non-essential travel, they're recommending that it should be avoided. Manitoba is the only province in the West that has a 14-day quarantine period when you're returning from interprovincial travel. So, of course, the 14-day quarantine is mandatory when you're returning from international travel, but Manitoba is the only West province with a 14-day quarantine for interprovincial travel. We did have some new restrictions come in place in BC and Alberta over the last 2 weeks. So when we're looking at restaurants, indoor dining is not permitted in either province. both BC and Alberta are allowing patio dining with your immediate cohort, so either your family or your close contacts, and they are allowing takeout and delivery. When it comes to Saskatchewan and Manitoba, restaurants are able to be open in Saskatchewan, 4 per table, but Regina and area is closed for in-person dining. With Manitoba, indoor dining is permitted with 60% occupancy and 6 people per table, whether you're indoors or outdoors. And both Saskatchewan and Manitoba are also allowing takeout and delivery. Retail is fairly open, relatively open across the Western provinces, but of course there's capacity restrictions in place. So BC limited based on your space. Alberta 15% capacity, Saskatchewan 50% capacity, 25 for the big box stores, and 50% capacity in Manitoba for the retailers. Personal services are open across the provinces in the West. However, there's some restrictions. So Alberta, by appointment only, no drop-ins. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are both limited to 50% occupancy within personal service businesses. And finally, to end off with fitness for the West, BC and Alberta both have said no go on the group fitness classes, and only one-on-one training is permitted within fitness facilities. In Saskatchewan and Manitoba, fitness is mostly open. Group fitness is allowed within Saskatchewan up to 8 people, and any fitness activities must maintain 3 meters of distance. And in Manitoba, fitness is open at 25% capacity. And I'll pass it over to Ryan for Ontario.
Thanks, Keely. So as many of you in Ontario will have heard, we instituted a new set of restrictions just last night that came into effect as of midnight. So right now, what's there is expected to last at least 28 days. So we're looking at the first week in May before anything changes. And as those of you who've been living through it know all too well, I don't think the government has hit that target for a lockdown when they've set it out once over the last year, so it's likely that it will last a little bit longer beyond that. So like the rest of the country, of course, large events, weddings, conferences, that sort of thing are still forbidden. Travel restrictions, we do have a province-wide stay-at-home order that took effect as of midnight. So that is in play. I want to underscore here, though, the government's intention here is to discourage movement. It's not to prohibit it. So there's not going to be any checkpoints that are set up on roads. Certainly, if you have employees or are doing business that cross into other health regions, you are still absolutely allowed to do that. I will note, I did hear just this morning an incident with an OPP officer pulling someone over and asking for a letter of employment to show that the employee was essential. I did speak with the Premier's office about it. That is not supposed to happen. That is not the intention of the rule, but if it does, please make sure that you are calling in to us so that we are able to flag it. But there should be no issues with your employees, your deliveries, or doing business across zones as long as you are a business that is open and able to operate. With restaurants, with the new orders that came in, indoor dining is still out across the province. Patio dining is now out across the province as well, not just Toronto, Peel, and the GTA, but the entire province. So limited takeout and delivery only. Retail, your pharmacies and your grocery stores and essentials remain open. Everything else is closed to in-person shopping. It's curbside pickup only. I did get a question in the chat about perhaps offering retail, say in the parking lot or outdoors on the sidewalk. I think it's a great question. Really like the creativity. I'm going to take that one back, but right now the instruction that we've gotten from government is that retail is limited to curbside only unless you are selling grocery, pharmacy, or other essential goods. Personal services, as Laura noted, I'm begging for a haircut. It's been a long 6 months, but that remains out across the province, and that's not just hair, it's nails, it's tattoos, it's piercing, waxing, any sort of personal service is fully out. And fitness is the other one, not just indoors, but also outdoors. Fitness is forbidden in Ontario. The one exception, unless you're the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Jays or the Raptors ever come back, if you're not professional sports, gyms are allowed to open to serve disabled clients specifically. That is the result of a court case that they can continue to do. However, for the general public, gyms remain closed to both indoor and outdoor service. Now we'll kick it over to the other half of the country and Francois.
Yeah, so you can see with Quebec that it's complicated, but I think it's in our DNA of Quebec to be complicated. So there's a lot of specificity because Quebec, we have four colors and region are based on the color regarding to the restriction that they have to apply. If you want to know what is currently in your region, you can go on quebec.ca/COVID-19. And you will have on the website a place that is called alert level by region. And you will have a map of the Quebec and you can zoom it and see what is currently happening in your region. So I encourage you to go see that if you want. But basically, big events, there are not big events in Quebec. Travel restriction also, non-essential travel, and now they have cut the yellow region because you have four colors. You have yellow, orange, red, and to put more restriction, they have put a more red under more restriction. So people that are not on the yellow region cannot travel there. Restaurant, you can have a dining in on the yellow region and orange region under other specificity, and on the red zone it's only takeouts and delivery. Retail, it's with limitation from a calculation regarding the feet of your retail commerce, and they are in very red regions. It's not non-essential business are not allowed, even in the big businesses than in the small one, but curbside pickup is allowed. Personal service on the red regions, it's not allowed, but in other regions, it is in color, it is allowed. And fitness is closed under red zone. So if you want to really know what is happening in your region, quebec.ca/COVID-19, and you will find a map of Quebec with all the detail of what is open and what is not in your region. And I will pass the speaker to Marty.
Thank you, Francois. So for Atlantic, while we are more open, I suppose, than the rest of the country, we do still have some restrictions in place, most notably in Edmundston or the Zone 4 region of New Brunswick. Across the board, though, with the big events, you're not seeing that here. So for travel restrictions, again, it's pretty much the same across Atlantic, with the variance being in Nova Scotia. They're asking for no non-essential travel outside of the provinces. Nova Scotia, however, is allowing for travel within Atlantic, but that's Nova Scotia only. With restaurants, again, pretty much open. There is some variance. For example, some provinces like Nova Scotia and PEI have closures at midnight. Newfoundland and PEI do have capacity limits. New Brunswick, though, with the Edmundston region, they are closed, limited to takeout. With retail across the board, it's all open. The only exception being, again, Edmundston region Zone 4. They need to do active screening of staff to be open. Personal services you see across Atlantic are open. So Brian, if you want to isolate for 14 days, you can come and get your hair cut, but not in Edmundston because they are closed. With fitness, you see the same kind of trend, open everywhere else but the New Brunswick Zone 4.
All right, so now that we've covered the restrictions across the country, we will move into the different provincial support programs. And we'll start in BC. So 2 grant programs available in BC. The first one is called the Small and Medium-Sized Business Recovery Grant. So a 10 to 30 grand grant for eligible businesses with an additional 5 to 15,000 available to those in the tourism industry. And of course, there's some rules around eligibility there, but essentially all you need the main eligibility requirement is that you have to have demonstrated a 30% revenue loss in any 1 month since March 2020. So Any month that you were 30% down, if you can compare that to the same month in 2019, you should be eligible for the program. Of course, there's a couple other stipulations. You have to be in operation for at least 18 months and have between 2 and 149 employees. The program is still open and will remain open until August 31st. Of course, we do recommend that you get your application in as soon as possible so you can avoid the last minute rush there. I included a link to the program for more information, but if you do have more questions on that one, of course, call into our business resources and one of our counselors can help you out with the application on that one. And the second program in BC is the Launch Online Grant Program. So this program is specific to those businesses looking to either create or improve upon their online platforms. And the grant will cover up to $7,500 and will pay up to 75% of eligible expenses. So similar criteria, have to have between 2 and 149 employees, have to have generated more than $30,000 in sales in the past year. But with this program, it's a little bit more involved. So you do have to create a grant proposal. So I encourage you to go online, check out what the eligible expenses are for this program to see if that would fit what you're looking at implementing before you start your application, because it is a bit more involved and can take some time. So that's BC's programs. Moving on to Alberta, of course, just last week, our SME relaunch grant that I'm sure many of you had applied for, the applications for that program have now closed. We have been made aware of a new program coming in, the Enhanced COVID-19 Business Benefit, and we've been told that it's supposed to open mid-April. However, due to the restrictions that were just announced this week, the Premier has indicated, and through conversations just this morning with their office, we are going to be getting a new program shortly, whether it's later this week or early next. So I won't spend too much time focusing on this, but we have been made aware that new support is coming for the businesses in Alberta.
And Keely, just to say that that's going to be true. You're going to hear that a lot. We're also waiting in BC. We're getting some noise that there might be a new program there. And just to assure the webinar participants that we will keep you up to date on any kind of new developments with these programs. Typically, it's the new restrictions and then the new programs come after that, unfortunately, despite many of us expressing that they should go hand in hand, I know.
Thanks, Laura. So we'll turn it over to Saskatchewan. So Saskatchewan has the Small Business Emergency Payment Program. This program is currently in its second phase. So it's available to new businesses as long as you were open by October 31st. And payments are based on 15% of your average monthly sales. So it's a maximum of $5,000 per business per eligibility period. The application for this program seems to be fairly straightforward. We haven't had too many issues with our members applying for this one. The application deadline is at the end of this month. So if you haven't got your application in for this one, I highly recommend that you do that so you can access some additional support there. Finally, Manitoba, much like Alberta, their bridge program closed just at the end of last month. So currently there are no support programs in place in Manitoba. Of course, we are pushing hard for the government to put the additional support back in place. We had some good news yesterday from the Manitoba budget, though. A couple of our recommendations were put forward in the budget. Some funding was set aside to help businesses with continued restrictions or increased restrictions. So that was good to see, but no details yet on what that's going to look like. And some additional tax relief to help manage costs was also included in the budget. So nothing much to report in Manitoba, but good news could be on the way shortly. And I'll pass over to Ryan again.
Thanks, Keely. So the first program I'm going to talk about, I want to underscore, this program is actually now closed. It closed at midnight tonight. right in line with when we brought in new restrictions. So note that we are fighting for this program to be reinstated. We are fighting for eligibility to be broadly expanded. I know a few of you have noted in the questions that your sectors have been left out. We are actively pushing for them to be included. And we are also already asking for a third round of funding to come from this in light of the new restrictions. But the reason why I wanted to talk about it is, as has been coming up in the questions, I know a lot of you are stuck in application limbo, where you've got your application in and either haven't heard anything at all, you're still facing that frustrating pending sign, or you've got approved and haven't seen any money coming down your way. Know that you are not alone. This is happening very broadly across our membership. We get dozens of calls daily. We are in contact with the government on it daily. They are aware of the issue too. It has come down to a staffing issue and, quite frankly, a lack of preparedness for the number of applications that were going to come in on the government side. But know that as long as you have an application in and it is in the process, it is okay that we are past the deadline. Things are still being processed and will ultimately, as long as you meet the eligibility criteria, still be approved. So I just wanted to underscore here that while this program is no longer available, just because you are in limbo does not mean that you are out. And if you are approved, in the next week or 2 weeks, you are also still approved for that second payment as well. And that payment will come automatically. There's nothing anyone needs to do. In fact, if you were trying to now, you actually couldn't go into the portal and apply for this or change your application at this point. So once you get that first payment, it should be a few more weeks at that point, but you will receive a second payment matching the first one coming in straight to your bank account. The one other bit around this one is for those businesses that are worried that you have something incorrect or there needs to be a clarification on your application process. The only avenues for that are to continue to call into Service Ontario and open a ticket. And I know how frustrating that is. I think the record I've heard is over 50 calls from a single business and not having heard back. We are all over the government on the lack of customer service on this one. And to use the email Small Bus Support Grant. That's bus, B-U-S, instead of biz, B-I-Z. Small Bus Support Grant at ontario.ca. And again, I know it's frustrating. I know many of you are already in the constant contact with the government through that email, but that continues to be the only channel for it. In the meantime, we continue to press again for an expansion and a reinstatement of that grant to ensure that as many businesses as possible are able to get the funding that they need to get to the other side of this most recent round of restrictions. The next program, if I can get the next slide, please, is the Property Tax and Energy Rebate Cost Grant. So this is, if you go into the application portal now, the one program that is still available. This is available to any business that has spent time closed or significantly impact in red, red plus, modified stage 2, gray, lockdown, or shutdown in the multitude of names that we have for things here in Ontario. If you have spent any time in any of those zones, you are eligible for a energy and property tax rebate for the amount of time that you spent in those zones for the billing. So if you spent only half the month in one of those zones, then you're eligible to get half of your bill back. If you spent the full month, you would get the full bill back. You can apply for this one as many times as you want, so no worries if you already applied for it and gotten payment for, say, January or February. You were still covered, as long as you're in one of those zones through March and through April. The other thing that I want to underscore here is that a lot of people are getting the energy rebate confused with another government energy program that's run through the Ontario Energy Board and service providers. That one is specifically for businesses that are late on their bills. We've had a lot of frustration where someone applies for that thinking they're applying for the energy rebate program, only to find out that because they're up on their payments that they're not eligible, and then we get a very angry phone call. Totally understand where it's coming from. The government has not made it easy, but you want to make sure you're going through the application portal that's linked on this page for that energy rebate. And again, that one you should get. It has not run out of money. It is still up and running and currently does not have a deadline. So if you haven't applied for those back months, you can. If you're planning on waiting out the next month and want to apply after that, you can absolutely do that as well. And then the last program on the next slide that I want to talk about, and I've gotten a few questions that have popped up already on it, is the Ontario Tourism and Hospitality Support Grant. So this is something that the government announced during the budget that was coming. It is specifically going to be for businesses in the tourism and hospitality sphere. And like the Ontario Small Business Support Grant, you're looking at a $10,000 to $20,000 grant based on very similar criteria. So you're still looking at a 20% or greater revenue drop. You're still looking at a maximum of 99 employees. For those wondering, the enterprise rule, where if you have multiple businesses, it is all being treated as a single entity. That is also expected to still be in play. The government is still sorting out exactly which businesses are going to qualify for this. The one thing that we know for sure is that if you receive the Ontario Small Business Support Grant, you will not be eligible for this one. They will not have a double dip on that side. We also know that right now this grant is set to be $10,000 to $20,000, like the original iteration of the Small Business Support Grant. We are already calling for them to, at minimum, match the Small Business Support Grant. This is, after all, a program that was designed to recognize a sector that was particularly hard hit. If they're doing that, then they should be matching the funding to represent that hit as well. So we are pressing the government to get this out immediately. We know that it's already been too long for a lot of the businesses that need it. Currently, though, the government has not set a date for when this is going to be up and running. The hope is by mid-April. That was the indication in the budget. But again, right now, they are still sorting out the logistics on their side. So stay tuned, keep an eye on the CFIB website. As soon as we have that information, we'll make sure that our district managers, that it's on our website, that our BR counselors are all aware and able to direct people there accordingly. And over to Francois.
Ryan. And for Quebec, there are two main programs that have been put in place by the Quebec government. They are mainly loan program. There's the Emergency Assistance Program for Small and Medium Businesses, the PAUPME, and it's a loan under 50K that businesses can ask to get, and it's managed locally. Though it's very complicated, there's a lot of red tape, and they are taking one arm, so you still have one to work to fill the red tape, but it's very, very complicated, and we are fighting to get the improvement of this support and to reduce the red tape, but still there's a program for small businesses in Quebec. After that, if you need more than 50,000, it's called the Concerted Temporary Action Program, and it's managed by Investissement Québec. You have the link there to see if you are eligible and to download the paperwork to fill to be able to have a decision under the fact that if you are available of that, because they do an analysis to see if the businesses were if the business was suitable before, not to loan to businesses that would have closed. So that's the interpretation of the Quebec government. Though they have put in place forgiven loan, and it's the next slide. It's called the Assistant for Business in Region of Maximal Alert, the IRAM in French, the ABRUMA in English. So basically, you can ask for forgiveness of your fixed expenses. To get access to that, you have to be under a closure order by the government, and it is you cannot ask for expenses that you could have received with the federal program that help on rent. So it's quite complicated, but they have put that in place. If you did not have asked for it in October, November, or December, you cannot ask for these months. So you can apply now, but it's going to be the month of January, February, and March. Though they have put additional support on that, is that if you were closed more than 90 days, you will have a bonus of 1 month, and if you were closed more than 120 days, you will have a bonus of 2 months. So it means you can government thinks that you can have almost all the loan you have asked forgiven. So we are now at the other slide, please. The part 2 of the ABRUMA. It's the 90 days for 50,000, and 30,000 for more than 90 days. So we still are pushing to have improvement for the support of government of Quebec. We have a petition, so if you want to sign it, you can ask your district manager, and we are pushing to have a better support for Quebec. There's a specific program also for tourism. It is a forgiven loan also, and you have the information in the next slide with the link to get for more information on that. But if you are in the sector of tourism, please be sure that you cannot have the two programs. You will have to choose under the PACT or the Abruma or under the program regarding the tourism. So it is the page 21 of the presentation. The next one, the assistant for tourism sector. So you can have 40% loan forgiveness. Please look at it if you are in the sector, but there are some rules regarding that you cannot have both programs. So be sure to take the one that is more suitable and more generous for you. And I can assure you that CFIB is rooting and fighting to have more for small businesses that are really badly impacted by COVID-19. Up to Marley.
Thanks, Francois. So just to begin with New Brunswick, so the first program here is the Small Business Recovery Grant. So it's a grant of up to $5,000. To access that, you have to be a small business who was impacted by the public health restrictions. So that was under orange, red, or lockdown levels. Had to have happened for at least a week between October and March. So this program, just a few other details on it, it does require financial statements to prove the year-over-year sales drop of 30% or more just for those months. So we have had some comments around that. Another kind of issue we've heard about it is just with the between 2 to 99 people full time. So that's another thing that has come through to the BER counselors. And again, just that this program, the claiming dates have now passed. So it went till March 31st. You do still have time to apply till the end of this month, April. We've also been in touch with the minister responsible for this, and Opportunities NB has told us that for those who are still impacted in Zone 4, so that Edmundston region, they're going to continue to assess applications as appropriate for those dates in March. In our most recent budget in New Brunswick 2, there was, I believe, $5 million was rebudgeted towards this program, but we don't know if or when it's going to be used. If it is used though, however, we do plan on taking those kind of comments we've received just around the sales drop, financial statements, and the full-time staffing forward, just to open it up to more people. The next slide, I believe, is Nova Scotia. So we have two programs here. So the first, we did get a question about this earlier, the Small Business Real Property Tax Rebate Program. So this is a new program, and unfortunately the applications are not out yet, but we are told that they're going to be ready by the end of the month. So it's a one-time rebate of $1,000 or 50% of the property taxes paid for the last 6 months of the 2020 fiscal year. So if your business received the Small Business Impact Grant, either Part 1 or Part 2, and has experienced that 30% decline, you would be eligible for this. We would anticipate that the application is going to be similar for those impact grants, which we heard wasn't too onerous for businesses. So that's a plus. Going on to the next slide. So this is similar to that other property tax rebate program, but this is the tourism accommodation one. So this is actually Part 2. So there was a previous iteration of this program, with the big difference being we have a 25% increase. So Part 1 only covered a 25% rebate on the commercial property taxes that were already paid. This one we see it up to 50%. So again, the applications aren't open, but it's going to probably be the same as what we saw for Part 1. And with Part 1, we did see that it required you to have made a full payment on those property taxes before you could get the rebate. So the next slide is Prince Edward Island. So we have a new program here, which is a big one. So it's the Tourism Activation Grant. So this provides tourism businesses with a grant of it's at least $2,500. It could be all the way up to $50,000. So it's for any expenses your business has incurred prior to July 1st, just to assist with your reopening costs. A really good thing about this program is that it's very broad. So who can apply as you look to see the eligible operators? It's a really broad list of people who you might not necessarily think that you're associated with tourism, but it can be proved that you are. And also the eligible expenses are very broad as well. So it could be maybe you need new facilities placed in your building for health and safety reasons, stuff like that. So it's good to see just how broad the program is. And this is an opportunity for new business. We've been told that the applications are going to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. So if you don't have those historical financial statements, they are willing to work with you and to try to get you access to this program. And then there's a few more programs with Prince Edward Island as well that are, oh, hi Laura.
No, go ahead. I'm just a little ahead of myself because I know once you're done, we're going to come to some questions.
Okay, awesome. So there are just a few other programs that might be worth looking into for your businesses. So just really quickly, there's a web assistance program, and this is one that I've heard a lot of positive comments about for members just because now we're in an online world. So this is a great opportunity to bring your business online. This is a program that they brought in due to the pandemic, but it was so popular that it's being made permanent. So I would definitely recommend checking that out if you have the chance. You can get anywhere to up to $2,500 to cover these costs. And then another one worth mentioning is a special leave fund for the self-employed. So that's really meant to cover any kind of loss of earnings that you've had, anything under 50%, because it's not meant to replace the federal program, but say that you had to isolate while you wait for a negative test result before you can return to work. It's meant for those situations. So, and there's a few other programs as well around loan financing. So they're all on the website with the additional details below. So I'll give it back to Laura now.
Thanks so much, and thank you all for running through the programs. Yeah, and unfortunately, nothing there for Newfoundland and Labrador. I guess Morley was the last slide there. But I'll just mention before we get to questions that our next webinar, we've got that budget webinar that Corinne and I had talked about at the beginning. And so PayWorks is going to work with us to make it a little more interesting. As webinar attendants who've been with us for a while know, we continue to experiment on what works with this format and what doesn't. We've heard from lots of you to keep going and that you are enjoying them. So this is a special topic on the federal budget. Lots of budgets are in our rearview mirror, and a couple more provincial ones to come to. Okay, so I think we'll get on to questions now, and you may have some too, Corinne. I've got a great one from Betty that I just wanted to put to the group. And this is her first webinar in forever. And she's saying, and I know that many of you are going to want to jump in on this, but Ryan, this one is sort of especially for you, because our webinar participants don't see the rants that we have behind closed doors. And we're trying to calmly and clearly present information. But Betty's saying, I hope I'm not out of line, but I have to say that listening to the restrictions, it sounds more like we are living in communist Russia and not Canada. I think this might be particularly true of Ontario, Ryan. Is the CFIB fighting the government on these draconian, unnecessary restrictions? Or is your mandate just to help us navigate the restrictions? And Betty, I think that's a great question that others may have had too. And certainly, Ryan, you and I have had many conversations about the difference between British Columbia and Ontario with respect to some of these restrictions. So I'm gonna hand that one over to you first. But if anyone else wants to weigh in, I'll come to you next.
Absolutely, and thanks for the question, Betty, and certainly a sentiment that we're hearing a lot from members, certainly here in Ontario. The short answer to your question is yes, absolutely, we are fighting against the restrictions. We're doing what we can to help business owners navigate the programs and the rules and what's going on, but we are absolutely pushing back on our end too. You saw at the beginning of the webinar the slide looking at what's different between all provinces, and I will note what's not on that slide is the body makeup, the virus itself, the fact that we all have doctors and medical systems and chief medical officers of health, and yet you've got 10 very different circumstances across the board. And in one place you can get a haircut, not that I've been thinking about that too much, and in other places like here you can't. So specifically here in Ontario, I can say that what we're asking the government to do is drop the blanket lockdown approach after a year plus in lockdown. We can't keep trying the same old tired thing that does not appear to be working, especially when we have more data, more technology, more options available. And one of the things that we're really pressing them to do is make use of rapid testing. We know that the government is sitting here on hundreds of thousands of rapid tests. We know they're using it in some larger sectors of the economy like manufacturing, but this is the kind of thing that could be used, say, for a hairdresser and their client in advance of the appointment so they can keep it. It could be used for a gym owner, for a car dealership, for by appointment shopping, to actually allow people back into businesses and get at least a little bit of revenue going while we ramp up the vaccination process and slowly get back to normal. So we are absolutely pushing it. We are also putting ideas on the table, not just saying, hey, these restrictions shouldn't be here, but also these are the type of things that we can do about it. And again, hopefully we'll see some movement soon, because this blanket lockdown approach just isn't working, and it isn't working for anyone.
Yeah, and just to let you know, quite a few webinar participants are coming in behind you, Betty, saying, that communist China and communist Russia combine, and that drop the blanket lockdowns. And I mean, one of the things we've seen, for example, hairdressers in British Columbia have been open for most of the time, not in Ontario. And when the lockdowns get divorced from the evidence, that's when we really start to go hard. If there's evidence that the cases are coming from hairdressers, then that's one thing. But when there's no evidence that that's part of the problem, then why are they being locked down? And I know, Ryan, you and others have talked about how they're being sort of used as almost like a scapegoat or a signal to others to reduce their activity, but it's not clear that it's clear that that's not really working. I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in on that. Francois, I know Quebec has also been fairly shut down, and you've been vocal on making sure that we're linking the evidence to the cases. I don't know if you wanted to make a comment.
We are seeing that small businesses are part of the solution, and we are trying to really spin that to not put the view of the population as some sector that do not have any problem and that are shut down, and the little retailers are one example. And I used to say that in interview. It's if you enter a small retail non-essential business and you can only be 3, you will see the 2 other customers every time, and you can have the 6 feet, and it's much safer than going to buy meat at Walmart.
That's a very good point. Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? I know we're really active in this space, and we're trying to find the right messages. As you can see, many of our colleagues are doing an awesome job of that. Any other thoughts or comments from the panel before we go to the next question?
I think the only thing I'll add, of course, is we've been doing quite a bit of media nationally as well, not just provincially, on this particular issue, to sort of make sure that all governments understand the perspective of small business when it comes to the impacts of these types of restrictions. And that, as you said, Ryan, that there are other measures and other means that could be used and as an alternative. So while it is, I think, the most apparent in Ontario, it is something that we're trying to make sure is all across the country is being heard.
Yeah, and the thing is that we're really trying to reflect too. We survey members all the time, and it's based on the majority of views. And we've got some even now saying that Heather's reminding us that there's other perspectives on this, that the restrictions aren't draconian, and it's finding that balance between keeping people healthy and safe and keeping as much business activity open as possible. And Francois, your point around having a couple of people in a small business being safer than having them all crammed into a Costco or a Walmart is one that we've made many times. But on our last survey, I think we had 80% agreeing that governments need to find more creative ways to get people out and able to do the things, to be less restricted in the activities and their shopping and their support of small business, while keeping people safe. So Heather, good reminder on that, and we do pay attention to all of the perspectives from our surveys. Corinne, do you have any questions or comments in your inbox?
I am going to just touch on something federally because it's come in more than a few times now, just sort of to answer the question. We've had quite a few questions about the extension of the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy. So people are asking if there's been any news on the extension of either of those. As everybody knows, they were extended till June 5th with using the current rules that have been in place since earlier in the year. There has been no news yet on whether either of those will be extended. However, it's been a very important focus of ours as part of the pre-budget recommendations that all support programs, in particular those two, the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy, remain in place as long as restrictions remain on businesses of any kind. It doesn't have to just be lockdowns, but restrictions. They cannot remove those particular programs until businesses are able to fully reopen and operate. So we're pushing hard for those extensions to happen because it's at this point unlikely that we'll be completely out of everything by June 5th. So my hope is that in the budget on the 19th, we're going to see at least some indication that that's the direction the government is going to go. In our sort of meetings, certainly people are open to the feedback we're providing to them. No one has sort of outright said, no, we're never going to do that. So we're hopeful that there's an understanding that this has to continue as long as these restrictions continue. So I just wanted to get that in because it's come up a few times now in the questions that are coming to me.
I just saw that I have a question. I didn't open the correct box, so if I may respond to some question. There's Adam who said that to put clarification for Quebec that some sport fitness are permitted in red zone, pool, tennis, badminton. Yes, we just add a challenge to put too much information in small box. So yeah, there is some precision. So please go on the website of Quebec government, and you will all see the precision. I had received a question on the PAU-PME program from Adam. Say it's a nightmare of red tape, for sure. We could have asked government to put in place the best example of what is red tape, and I think that they have done it. With that program, we have tried and we keep pushing to reduce the red tape there. We have did it on a personal meeting with the minister, with other groups, in the media with a frontal attack of the minister, and we will continue to put the pressure. We have now 2,200 SMEs that have signed our petition. And please be sure that we'll continue to fight to have better program. Though I'm not promising anything, but I promise that we will still be there. Like Laura said, never give up, never go away is the mantra of the CFIB. I have another question of VJs on a change of a business model. I cannot answer your question right now, but please call the helpline on 1-888-234-2232. We have received 10,000 of business cases, and you have a counselor that can answer you in English, and that will be able to help you if we can on your question regarding what you're facing right now on the changing your model because I think the person has a bar, but please don't be afraid to call business resources. They are they are professional there that can help you with your question.
Thanks, Francois. And we're coming up to the end of our time where I typically will ask everyone to make a few comments, but I'll just sneak one more question in from Lisa. Lisa has swim lessons and they've been canceled for months, and so of course that introduces other risks, which is a big challenge with some of these restrictions, right? As you restrict one thing, but that introduces other risks. In her case, she's saying that the risk of drowning will go up if people don't know how to swim and the pools are safe. But she's feeling like CFIB is continuing to focus on the same industries, kind of like, what about her case? And Lisa, I just wanted to say that I know that we do focus on some of the big categories, but we're also our rate specific examples like that. I know, Ryan, you had some luck early in the pandemic with pet food stores being declared an essential service. Now, unfortunately, they're now shut down other than curbside, but I know you've taken on a number of those sector specific, as have you, Keely and Marley and Francois, that we do get involved with those. Those aren't always the ones we put in lights, but a swim lesson, a swim pool. Lisa, I'm not sure which province you're in, but we'd love to hear more from you. And if we can help raise those specific cases, we're doing a lot of that work as well. And with that, Corinne, if you have any others you want to sneak in, otherwise I think I'll start wrapping us up because there's a number of us to make comments on this wrap up. So typically what I do at this point in the webinar is just give everyone a moment to say just a few words of, inspiration or good luck or last comments or last point they want to make. And so maybe I'll start with you, Corinne, and then I'll go to the other, to our provincial colleagues, and then I'll close us out.
Sure. So I am going to just sneak in one other issue that's coming up a few times now. There's a few of you who are waiting to get some fixes on your CEBA applications for the extra 20,000. I know many of you have been facing long waits to have some discrepancies in your application corrected. We're still working on that. We're still putting pressure on EDC every day. In fact, we have a meeting with the president of EDC this afternoon to talk about this very thing. So just stand by. Unfortunately, it is still not ready to be used, even though they promised to have it ready by the end of January. So we are still working on that, and there is hopefully some hope soon, but I'm hoping to get to know more by the end of today. I want to thank all of our colleagues. This has been fun and way too short, so maybe this is something we can do again in the future. You've all been great, and I think this information has been super valuable. I can tell by the number of questions that we're all getting that this has again been something that I think has been well received. I want to thank all of our listeners here today as well. It's always good to get your feedback. As usual, please remember that we can't always get to every question, but we are absorbing it, using it in our own FAQs, using it as part of our survey processes, and using it as part of our lobbying. As always, again, I have some really good information here that'll help me in the work that I'm doing every day in Ottawa. So I encourage you to continue to provide us with your thoughts and feedback. It's important in terms of the work that we do. And I feel terrible about the current restrictions that are happening here in Ontario, and I know in other parts of Canada as well. And so please know that we're here, and we're here to continue to support you and continue to represent your interests with government. So please feel free always to send us your information and what's going on, because we're going to do the best that we can to get in front of the people that can hopefully make the changes that are needed. So thanks again.
So maybe I'll go from east to west this time, Marley, and start with you if you have any final comments or wrap up sentiments for our members.
Thanks, Laura. I just wanted to point out really quickly, as I had kind of skipped over Newfoundland and Labrador slide, the small business assistance program they did have in place, unfortunately, has closed. And just due to the timing, I guess, of the election that had happened and the outbreak at the same time, it was very problematic to get any changes brought forward with that. But that is something we continue to advocate on. We would like to see programs opened up to new business, and as well going forward that the application be less intensive. And again, to provide retroactive support to those who were kind of left out in the cold during the outbreak and the pandemic in the province. Thank you.
Thanks, Marley. Francois?
Yeah, before saying a word, I just want to say to Carol that she asked a question I did not respond, that you did, the PAU-PME is linked to the IRAM. So if you want to have the forgiven loan, you have to have the loan. So the program are linked. And I want to say to all of you that you are facing very tough time right now, and CFIB is there for you. It's an honor for me, it's an honor for my colleagues to be there to fight for small and medium businesses and to fight that we won't have, except the red color, any link to a communist country restriction. And we will do everything we can so that we can pass that difficult time and talk to other issue as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Francois. Ryan.
Yeah, I think Francois said it really well. Thanks everyone for attending today, but also thank you for continuing to do what you do. I know that this last 14 months now hasn't been easy for anybody, and know that I know some days with the light being at the end of the tunnel and just around the corner and the game changers, and then nothing ever seems to change, can seem pretty hopeless. And just know that there is someone who's very much in your corner, and we are here. We are here to hear you out. Please don't stop calling the hotline. They do raise the issues with the legislative teams across the country. We do hear you, and we do take your issues right to government. We are making sure that your voice is heard and continues to be heard. Because at the end of the day, when it comes time to recover and when we can all get out of this, there's nothing without small business in this country. So thank you, and hang in there. We'll do our best.
Thanks, Ryan. And Keely, the West. Oh, I think you're on mute.
That never gets old. Yeah, so just to wrap things up for the West, of course, in BC and Alberta, keep your eyes open for the upcoming new programs that will potentially be announced within the coming days and weeks. And we'll be watching for those and make sure our website's up to date with all that information. Like Ryan said, don't hesitate to call in with any additional questions. Today was a special day where just 4 of us got to be here, but we have many more provincial colleagues who are working their butts off behind the scenes, on these COVID issues, but there's issues popping up in BC with regards to tax on vacant space above buildings, and municipal elections coming up here in Alberta. So while we are super focused on COVID still, as we need to be, we are on those other issues as well. So if there's any other issues that are coming to your mind or are impacting your business, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and I want to say a huge thank you to all of the provincial colleagues for the work you're doing, as you so eloquently put it, Keely. You guys are working your butts off for our members, and I think that comes through. And there's a lot of members saying thank you I'm getting in my box. So thank you for the good work, and thank you for the jokes on today's webinar. We know how serious the situation is, but we hope at trying to inject a little bit of humor. Laughter is the best medicine. So we're also trying to inject a little bit of humor into this awful nightmare on Main Street that we're going through. And as my colleagues all said, we're in your corner. And I guess the last thought I'll leave you with today is just to come back to those early quotes. And sometimes even in an awful day, there's a good moment. And remembering to sort of maybe put a spotlight on the good moments, even in the awful days or awful weeks. Can help get through trying times. And with that, I look forward to future webinars, and I think the next one we've got coming up is on the budget. But of course, if something breaks that is big before then, we will make sure we're here. We're going to continue doing these regularly. They may not always be weekly anymore, just because if we don't have anything really new, we're getting some feedback that that may be less useful. So we're trying to make sure that there's really good content for you each and every time we show up here. But stay in touch with us in other ways through the helpline. We're always happy to talk to you, and your examples are golden. To use with politicians, to use with media, and help people understand the predicament we're in. And then, of course, the good news is that although it's way slower than any of us want, the vaccines are, they are rolling out, and at some point, that has to mean that we're going to turn a corner. Until then, we will be there. We will be there on this, and as Keely rightly pointed out, other issues as well. Thanks, everyone. And with that, we'll end today's webinar. Have a great rest of your week.